In this video, I'll show you how to build a reusable Carousel Selector node for your settings menu. Instead of rebuilding complex UI from scratch every time, or create a modular system that saves hours of development. Adding new settings is incredibly simple. Just duplicate a node, configure the export variables, and connect your signals. You can grab the project files on my Patreon. If this helps your workflow, please like, subscribe, and join our community on Discord. All links are in the description. We'll begin with a generic base class that all future settings will inherit from. From there, we'll create a specialized Carousel Selector base, which then branches into two functional versions, a standard and a loopable class. I'll dive into the specifics of each as we implement them, but keep in mind that this hierarchy is what makes the system so flexible for future expansion. Alright, let's start with the base class for all reusable nodes. Create a new script called settingBase. The class name should be settingBase. It should extend node. Give it an export variable called settingName of type string_name. Then we need a reference to the setting label. Finally, in the ready function, all we need to do is set the settings label text to the setting name. Next up, we're going to build the Carousel Selector base class. They'll have two buttons that let you cycle between a list of options. This has no equivalent in Godot, but it's a common UI element found in a lot of settings menus. This will be an abstract class. The class name will be Setting Carousel Selector Base, and it will extend settingBase. It will have a custom signal called updated. In fact, every settingBase will have an updated signal, but since their types can be different, I put them in their inherited class instead of the base class. Then we need 4 export variables, one for the default value, one for an array of string names. These will be the names of the options, like easy, normal, or hard, and 2 for the selected dot colors. The default on color will be a solid white, while the default off color is also a solid white, but with only 10% in its alpha channel. There needs to be a lot of contrast here, or else it'll be hard to tell which one is on. We'll also have 2 regular variables, a default index and an index. The default index gets calculated based on what the user sets the default value to. This prevents the user from having to input a number for the index along with the default value. They can just put in the default value and the script will calculate the rest. And the index will keep track of where we are in the cycle. Then we need a reference to our increase and decrease buttons, our option label, and our container for the selector dots. Inside the ready function, we'll call the ready function of the parent class with super.ready. Then we'll set the default index to whatever gets calculated by the getDefaultIndex function. The getDefaultIndex function is a function that loops over all of the option values and tries to find the default value the user provided. If it can't because the default value was empty or because it couldn't be found in the option value array, then we push an error. But we also set the default value to the first element of the option values array. Ideally, if you had set a bad default value, you would want to fix it, but this makes it not be the end of the world. Next, set index to be our default index. Then we can connect our buttons to the onPressed functions, which in this class will be abstract. All this does is tell Godot that we must implement these functions in the inherited class. Failure to do so will cause an error. Then we emit updated so that the setting manager script knows to change this setting to our default setting. We can set the option label text to default value. Next, we create all of the selection dots. These are the little elements under the option value. Loop over all of the option values and create a color rect. Set some settings on it, including our selected dot off color, and most importantly, we're adding it as a child to the color rect container node. And lastly, we call update selected dot, which gets all of the children of the color rect container and sets them all to the off color before setting the one that needs to be on to the on color. Create a new scene. It's going to be an HBoxContainer. The scene name should be Setting Carousel Selector. Set its anchor preset to full rec. Add a label. Rename it to setting label, set its text to setting label, add a control node, set its horizontal to expand, add a button, rename it to decrease, set its text to be a less than symbol, set its custom minimum size to 46 pixels on the x-axis. I'll explain why in a moment. Add a HBoxContainer, add a label as a child of the HBoxContainer, rename it to option value, set its text to option value, set both its horizontal and vertical alignment to center. Set its custom minimum size to 100 pixels on the x-axis. Add an HBoxContainer as a child of the HBoxContainer. Rename it to color rect container. Finally, add a button. Rename it to increase. set its text to be a greater than symbol, set its custom minimum size to 46 pixels on the x-axis, and I'll explain right now. The idea is that the right side should be flush. In order to do that, all sizes for the node to the right of the control node should add up to 200 pixels or whatever size you're going for. In our case, we also have to account for the 4 pixels of separation that will be applied by the HBox container by default. So if your theme sets a different separation, that needs to be accounted for. The formula for the width of the button is the width we're shooting for, which in our case is 200, minus the 2 separations. Both of them are 4 pixels, so 8 pixels total. Then subtract the width of the option label, which is 100, and then all of that divided by 2, which leaves us with 46. Now we just have 2 small scripts to go. This next script will be for the standard carousel selector. Create a new script. It should have a class name of setting carousel selector and extend setting carousel selector base. We just need to implement our 2 abstract functions. Since this is the non-loopable version, we just need to check if there's an empty place for the index to go to, and if there is, increase or decrease the index, set the option label text, admit that the setting was updated, and update our selected dots. For the loopable carousel selector scene, just duplicate the standard carousel selector and append loopable to the name. Then, instead of using the previous script, you'll use the script I'm about to show you. Create a new script, call it setting carousel selector loopable. It should extend setting carousel selector base. We just need to override the abstract functions again. Like before, we're checking if the index can be increased or decreased one more, and if so, do so. But otherwise, wrap around to the beginning, and then update all the stuff. To demo this, I've created a test scene. I've dragged in 2 instances of our standard carousels and 1 loopable. I've configured its export variables. These will change the difficulty, turn subtitles on or off, and change the maximum frame rate. I've created a settings manager script. It has 3 methods: on difficulty carousel selector updated, on subtitles carousel selector updated, and on limit FPS carousel selector updated. And then I'm connecting the updated signals to the corresponding function. Also, I have an auto load that will print the state of the settings when I press a key. When we run the test scene, notice that each setting gets set to their default value. When I press a key, we can see that the auto load has the same data, and when we change any of the settings, it just works. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, liking this video if you found it useful. Don't forget to check out my Discord, and I'll see you in the next one.